Most of you have probably heard about Project Stargate, an alleged secret program in which the United States military was said to be seeking absolute military superiority through occult and supernatural methods. The goal was simple: to obtain a form of power no enemy could predict or defend against. Before I briefly explain what was supposedly being trained inside the classified Stargate project, let's listen to something far more recent. Words from Donald Trump himself regarding secret weapons.
We have weapons that nobody knows about, and I say it's probably good not to talk about them, but we have some amazing weapons.
Many people believe that the weapon used during the operation involving the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was something entirely new, something highly intelligent, advanced, and eerily reminiscent of science fiction movies. To put it very simply, reports have suggested this. Did the US military use a classified sonic weapon during the Venezuela operation? According to eyewitness at the scene, a small US Special Forces team encountered almost no resistance. The guard stations where Maduro was located were reportedly unable to even fire their weapons. So what happened to them? Why couldn't they react? Reports indicate that the soldiers suffered from severe disease, vomited, and internal bleeding. Military analysts believe this was a form of what they call a soft kill operation, likely carried out using a high-powered microwave-based device, exactly like a microwave oven in your kitchen, just with a slight adjustment in intensity and power. Venezuelan soldiers who were carrying out routine guard duties around the facility suddenly experienced a complete radar blackout without any warning. Moments after the systems went offline, a massive swarm of drones appeared above the site. Shortly after that, 8 helicopters equipped with unknown technology and an undefined power source entered the area. A 20-man team from Delta Force and US Special Operation units descended from the helicopters. The confrontation took on a strange and unsettling tone when reports claimed that the defending forces, nearly 100 soldiers, were completely unable to respond. They appeared frozen in place, utterly incapacitated. Despite their numbers, they were incapable of resistance this small Delta Force unit after it landed. Soon after, gunfire was directed at the semi-conscious guards, who for reasons still unknown had been rendered immobile, and all security personnel were neutralized. Donald Trump never revealed details. He only stated that special weapons were used, without ever specifying what those weapons were. Based on eyewitness accounts and field reports, theories suggest that Black Hawk combat helicopters were used to deploy this technology. Objects resembling a disc were reportedly mounted on the helicopter devices that caused immediate dysfunction in the victim's cardiac vestibular system. The result, complete loss of balance and sudden paralysis. Some soldiers reportedly had fluid leaking from their noses. Others suffered instant nose bleeding. Some even began coughing up blood. The Pentagon's only admission was vague. They describe it simply as a soft kill device, a weapon designed to quietly neutralize target without gunfire or explosions. So what exactly is this strange weapon? The most likely explanation is that these disc-like devices emit specific waves capable of disabling the human body. No audible sound, nothing within the range of human hearing. Instead, something closer to an extremely powerful microwave-based emission focused on a specific area. A beam that passes directly through the human skull. These waves are absorbed by the water content in brain tissue and the fluids of the inner ear. The absorbed energy causes a rapid, extremely slight temperature increase, less than 1 degree Celsius. But even this tiny, sudden expansion creates a pressure wave inside the skull. As a result, the victim may hear sounds such as clicking, buzzing, or roaring, sounds that originate from inside their own head, completely bypassing the eardrums. This triggers a process. I won't get overlay technique here, because this isn't a physics class, but the result is devastating. The body's balance system completely collapses. A sudden, overwhelming vertigo hits you out of nowhere. Now, depending on the power of the wave being emitted and precisely directed at the targets, at the higher intensities, that rapid expansion can easily rupture the brain's capillaries. That's exactly why it's called a soft kill. The victim suffers an instant nosebleed and dies. This was just a recent example. Remember this, armies and intelligence agencies never fully disclose these things to the media. If they did, it would be unbelievably foolish. Hold on to this thought, because now we are heading toward something more stranger. 3rd March 1947. The Southern Ocean. These are the most unforgiving waters on Earth. A place where frozen wind howl across ice shelves exceeding 100 miles per hour, and the sun, when it decides to appear, offers no warmth at all. Only a blinding light. This is the end of the world. A frozen, abandoned, silent land. But in early 1947, that silence was shattered by the roar of heavy machinery cutting through compacted ice. The massive bow of the USS Mount Olympus pushed forward. Behind it followed a fleet that looked far more like an invention force than a scientific expedition. This was Task Force 68. 13 ships, aircraft carrier, destroyers, submarines, and more than 4,700 men. They entered Antarctica under orders to remain for 6 to 8 months. On paper, their official mission was to map the continent and test military equipment under extreme conditions. But less than 8 weeks after their arrival, they were already leaving. The retreat was hurried, abrupt, and almost panicked. The official mission timeline was cut short by months. The massive logistic machine of the United States Navy, the same force that had recently crushed the Axis power across Europe and the Pacific, was now turning its back on the ice and racing north at full speed. But why? Official Navy reports blame deteriorating weather conditions. They claimed that an early Antarctic winter had made continued operation impossible, and perhaps for the history books that explanation was meant to be enough. But before the fleet ever reached American soil, the commanding officer made a statement that permanently shattered the official narrative. Admiral Richard E. Byrd was not a man given to fantasy. He was a national hero, a pioneer of polar exploration, and a disciplined US Navy officer. Someone who understood the difference between an imaginary threat and a real one. And yet, on March 5, 1947, while the fleet had stopped in Santiago, Chile for short-term resupply, Byrd gave an interview to the respected newspaper El Mercurio. He didn't talk about the cold, he didn't mention penguins or polar hardships. He issued a warning. An open, direct, and deeply unsettling warning about a new kind of warfare. Admiral Byrd was quoted as saying, The United States must take defensive measures against hostile aircraft capable of coming from the polar regions. And he didn't stop there. With a seriousness that felt strange, almost alarming for a peacetime press interview, the admiral continued. The United States may be attacked by enemy aircraft capable of flying from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Now let's pause for a moment and put this into context. What year was this? 1947. World War II had ended 2 years earlier. The Imperial Japanese Navy was resting at the bottom of Pacific Ocean. The Soviet Union, while considered a growing threat, did not possess aircraft capable of traveling from the South Pole to the North at unimaginable speeds. And the man saying this was no ordinary individual. He was an admiral. What makes this even more striking is that at the time, the jet age was only just beginning. The fastest operation fighter aircraft in the world were still struggle to break the sound barrier, let alone cross such vast distances. So what was he talking about? What or who had Admiral Byrd seen in the frozen depth of the Antarctic continent? What were these enemy aircraft moving at almost supernatural speeds, and why did a fleet equipped with the most advanced weaponry of its era abandon its mission months ahead of schedule? To understand the true weight of bird warning, we have to move beyond the sanitized official reports. We need to step into the mindset of that era. Because although the world appeared to be at peace, intelligence agencies in Washington and London were operating at full alert. Whispers were circulating through the corridors of the Pentagon. Whispers about missing German submarines, unaccounted battalions, and technologies that had vanished from the collapsing laboratories of the Third Reich. When Task Force 68 headed south, they weren't going there just to admire icebergs. They were searching for something else. Something the US government believed was hidden at the last uncharted frontier on Earth. And if we correctly interpret the disturbed, almost haunted expression on Admiral Byrd's face, they may have found it. But to understand how the mission ended, we have to go back how it began. First of all, everyone knows this. You do not deploy an aircraft carrier to study the weather. That story was never the real one. You send an aircraft carrier to project power. Just like today, when these floating fortresses are positioned near strategic waters around the Persian Gulf, you send them for war. August 1946. The world appeared to be at peace. Victory parades were over. Treaties had been signed, and Europe's weapons had finally fallen silent. But in the naval shipyards of Norfolk, Virginia, the United States military was quietly assembling a force that looked as if it was preparing for another world war. This was not a small research team. This was a hammer under the name Task Force 68. This armada consisted of 13 heavy ships. At its center stood the USS Philippine Sea, and a six-class aircraft carrier, one of the most powerful warships of its time, capable of launching waves of combat-ready aircraft at the moment's notice. Surrounding it were destroyers, oil tankers, icebreakers, and perhaps most telling of all, the USS Senate, a below-class submarine, fully armed with torpedoes. But why? Why would you need a submarine to study ice shelves? Why would you need carrier-based bombers to photograph penguins? They didn't explain. The Navy's Public Relations Office worked tirelessly to present Operation High Jump as a harmless expedition. They claimed the mission had two objectives: to train personnel in polar condition, and to extend US sovereignty over the largest unclaimed landmass on Earth. And while these goals were technically true, they failed to explain the urgency. Why the operation was launched in such a rush that many of the ships weren't even properly winterized. To understand the real motivation, we have to look into the shadow that were roaming through post-war intelligence files. By late 1946, Washington had fallen into a very specific kind of paranoia, a constant, gnawing paranoia. The war with Germany was over, but the numbers didn't add up. Allied intelligence agencies had spent months combing through the ruins of the Third Reich, only to discover deeply troubling gaps in their records. Key scientists had vanished. Blueprints for advanced wonder weapons, jet aircraft, missiles, and exotic propulsion systems were missing. But more disturbing than all of this was the mystery of the U-boats. In the final weeks of the war, a significant number of German submarines left their ports in Norway and Germany, entered the Atlantic, and simply disappeared. They didn't surrender, they didn't scuttle themselves, they just vanished. Then, months after Germany's official surrender, something strange happened in the South Atlantic. In July and August of 1945, two German submarines, U-530 and U-977, suddenly surfaced in Mar del Plata, Argentina. Their crews surrendered to local authorities, but when US intelligence officers interrogated the commanders, the timelines made no sense. The submarines had remained at sea far longer than their full capacity should have allowed. They were almost empty. No high-ranking Nazi officials, no gold, no advanced technology. So where had they gone? What had they unloaded before surrendering? Rumors spread through the intelligence community like a virus. Talk of a final battalion, an emergency plan designed by Nazi elites, valuable assets to a secure, remote location in the event of Germany's collapse. And there was only one place on Earth remote enough to hide an entire fleet, yet stable enough to build a fortress. New Swabia, Antarctica. Admiral Byrd was aware of these rumors when Task Force 68 headed south in December 1946. He wasn't walking in blind. He knew this mission was far more than a simple scientific operation, and he understood one critical thing. If even a fraction of those rumors were true, whatever was hidden beneath the ice of Antarctica had the potential to permanently shift the balance of global power. But what the forces encountered there went far beyond the worst-case scenarios ever drafted inside Pentagon war rooms. According to unofficial reports, reconnaissance aircraft that penetrated deep into the continent began encountering phenomena that did not align with any known technology. Objects in the sky moving at unimaginable speeds, maneuvers that openly mocked the laws of aerodynamics. Some pilots reported that these objects were not only faster than any aircraft on Earth, but capable of vertical ascents, sudden full stops, and instant acceleration, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Radio equipment malfunctioned, compasses failed, and in some cases, aircraft simply went down without explanation. There were even reports of direct engagements. Some aircraft from the fleet never returned. The crews who did make it back were shaken, silent, and clearly marked by whatever it was they had witnessed. At the same time, the fleet's ships were not spared. Unidentified targets were detected near the waters. Sonar systems pick up contact that resemble neither submarine nor any known marine vessel. Some of these objects were moving faster than any submarine ever recorded, and then, without a trace, they vanished. Within weeks, it became clear that Task Force 68 was no longer the hunter. It was the prey. The order to retreat was issued when secrecy was no longer possible. Continuing the mission was not just pointless, it was suicidal. And what is why the most powerful navy on Earth left Antarctica quietly, hastily, and without any convincing explanation. When Admiral Byrd spoke in Chile, he did not reveal a great secret. He merely pulled the curtain back. He issued a warning not only to the United States government, but to the entire world that the next threat might come from a place no one expects. Not from the east, not from the west, but from the poles. And perhaps that is why the documents related to Operation High Jump were stamped top secret years later. Perhaps that is why the official narrative has always felt incomplete, because something, if fully revealed, can no longer be controlled. Thank you guys for watching us. As I said in first of this video, it is our first video here and first content, and we really need your support. Like, comment, like, sub, anything you want. Thanks you for watching. See you soon.